I've muted you all because I'd like to talk. Welcome all to this remote exchange session. Most of us are know each other, so I see only a few new names, but welcome anyway. The idea behind the remote exchange session is actually to exchange remote, we understand, exchange actually experiences with the pilots in SCIFI on specific topics we have defined and we have found out during the running of the pilot. I think it's interesting. It's in a small group, so we actually didn't make this a public thing because we really wanted to share the learnings between ourselves, between the partners in the SCIFI project and the organizations with whom we're working together. Besides that, this session, the whole of this session is actually an input for the final cookbook. So for whoever doesn't know it, my name is Fons van der Ham. I'm the project manager for Delft for the SCIFI project. And I'll kick off with, for those of you who know SCIFI not too well, with a very short introduction on the basis of SCIFI, which is not real science fiction, but it's just a smart city innovation framework implementation. And for those who don't have that, just note smartcityinnovation.eu. That's where also you can register for the newsletter, or you can request to get the cookbook as being one of the first to receive that when it's available in the spring of 21. Below you see actually the partners who are engaged and involved with the project, and if I'm typing the right, that's the wrong one. My chat view is blocking my my other view. There it is. Okay. Okay. Number 2. So what is the idea of SCIFI? The idea is actually to create and to have some pilots, I would say, proof of concepts for mid-sized cities that are opening data will create value and better services for the city and citizens. So we see a couple of things in there. Mid-sized cities, so it's not for Berlin and Paris and London. It's for the mid-sized cities between, say, about 50,000 to 200,000 inhabitants. It's about opening data, creating value and better services for city and citizens. That's the whole idea of this project, how to test and to learn how to approach that in that environment. Co-creation and interoperable and scalable cross-border solutions for solution providers. That's a lot of nice English words, but also here co-creation is very important. Interoperability, we'll talk about that today. Scalability across borders, and we have been already looking into that. So that's not only interesting for the cities, but certainly also for the solution providers. And the 3 icons in the top basically say what's it all about. It's about mobility, it's about energy, and it's about, I would say, sustainability. These are the focus areas. Of course, there are many more areas. For instance, security could be an area in when we talk about services and open data and so forth. But for SCIFI, we have chosen these 3 areas. Basically, what we have been doing, and we're in the final stage of the project now. We have been developing mid-sized city challenges and business cases. I think about 17 or 16 in total in 2 rounds of accelerators. We have in all of those, we have deployed open data and learned from that. We started testing with innovative procurement, and we have made the start with the development of ecosystems and improvements in co-creation with the market, cities, citizens, and for instance, educational institutes. And at the end of this story, we all want to bring it together into a cookbook or a travel guide for open innovation with open data in mid-sized cities in Europe. And that's something which we'll be really working on as from next week. And also the input of today and everything what is shown today, that will be all part of that cookbook, which hopefully will come out in the spring of 2021 and will actually be a cookbook for all these smart city cooks throughout Europe. So that's a bit of a, in a nutshell, what SCIFI is. So I'm going further. So what's the agenda of today? I'm going one back. So we have 4 specific points. One, we're going to talk about data, which will be introduced by Hester Thorn from the city of Delft. Secondly, we'll then talk about interoperability with the use case of Saint-Quentin with 3 speakers. After that, we talk about digital twins and intelligence from Bruges, also with 3 speakers, and finally about infrastructure from Mechelen. So what I will do is I will actually share the screen with the speaker, who is then able, hopefully, to go through the slides themselves. So, Hester, are you ready to rock and roll?
Always.
Okay, so then I have to remote control, and I'm gonna give the keyboard control to Hester. Hopefully you can actually run it now.
Yes.
There you go, Hester. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Vance. Right, trying to get to the right slide. Here we are. I'm going to talk about data. This project, after all, is about creating value with the use of open data, also from citizens. So it's going too fast. I'd like to start with our challenge in Delft as a use case to introduce the hurdles that we had to take with regards to open data and the lessons that we learned from it. The use case is the cycling challenge of Delft. Delft is a city, as like many other cities in the Netherlands, where a lot of people use bikes to commute from their homes to their work or to university, specifically in Delft, the Technical University. And we have a lot of traffic jams in the morning.
Can everyone hear Hester?
I can't any longer. It was being cut off.
Let's try again. No, negative. If you look at Hester's running away. If you look at the controls and you go to the microphone, you can see where it's actually switched to the right microphone.
Hester?
Yeah.
Yeah, are you hearing me now?
Yeah, there you are. Thanks.
All right, so I have to start all over, I suppose. I will shortly introduce. So we started in Delft with a cycling challenge, and the challenge was that in Delft, as in many other cities, we have a lot of cyclists. People use their bikes a lot to commute from their homes to their jobs, to the Technical University, specifically in Delft. We had traffic jams that exist solely out of bikes. What we wanted to do and find out is have a better understanding of these cycling flows in the city, and specifically from the Delft station area to the Technical University, which was the most crowded. That's actually what we suspected. What we started from with regards to data is that we first figured out what is actually our data ecosystem at the moment. What data belongs to the city, what data do we collect as a city, and what data exists with other parties in the area that might be interesting to find a solution to gain more insight on these cycling flows. That is actually what you see now on the screen. This is what we call the data ecosystem. And when it comes to the data that we used, and then we found that we have within the city, we used the general data management model of the city. And you can see that we used basic registrations that are national registrations on geodata. They are actually already open data. And there is a number of data sets that were not opened yet and that we opened or partially opened during the pilot. We also mentioned that these are outside of the circle of Delft, data sets that come from other parties, such as the National Train Institute, I guess. They have data on the number of travelers that exit the station, for example. That might give an indication on how many would take a bike from there to commute to the technical university, for example. And we saw that there are parties, organizations that have bikes in the city that you can just take, and you can have like you can enroll for that, and you can just go on the street and take a bike and go from A to B and leave the bike somewhere else, which is Mobike. We already figured out that from certain parties, we were not able to get any data to use for the pilot, which is of course a challenge. So what we started from was that we were not willing to invest a lot of money and a lot of effort in installing sensors if it was possible to use data or data sets from third parties to get the same or similar results. So what this startup did and what we did was to figure out if there are any more data sets that we could use. There were. We got in contact with, I believe, 3 parties. It's going too fast, I see. Yeah. 2 third parties that were having data sets that might be of interest to gain these insights in these cycling flows. One of them was an app that people could download to determine the shortest routes from, for example, the station area to the technical university. And we came across a couple of questions. For example, if you use third-party data in solution development, what is actually the city's responsibility in using these data? So if you look at the use of the data sets that I just mentioned, so the routing app data, this is data of people that the third-party app collects, and it really gives all their information, it's personal information, and it determines their routes. To what extent is the city responsible for the right and to the GDPR compliant collection of these data sets? We, as in the city and our privacy officer, took a dive into the history and to the way that this third party collected these data. And we figured out that they were not, in our eyes, collecting these data compliant to the GDPR, which made us question, are we then willing to let our startup use this data to develop a solution that we are going to use as a city? Is it our responsibility or not? We had some tough discussions during our pilot phase, and in the end, we decided not to use it, but we went in a discussion with this third party, and we shared our idea and our opinion on why we think it's not GDPR compliant the way they collect their data, and how they could improve their collection so that others were able to use it without having any possible problems afterwards with the use of these data in creating our application. We took that responsibility to play, let's say, Sherlock Holmes and figure out how they collect their data and if it was GDPR compliant. But other cities that are in similar or working on similar applications might not. And we wonder, what do you think is actually the responsibility of a city with regards to these kind of questions? And do you think that the steps that Delft took within this pilot and the effort that we took is the right or not? So that is one question that I like to ask here.
Okay, thank you, Hester, for this question. Anybody wants to react or wants to elaborate a bit on their own experience with this dilemma, I would say, because I guess that this happens and happened also in other pilots in the different cities. So is there anyone who wants to comment on that? Oh, am I pushing now the wrong buttons? Okay, not everyone at the same moment. What about in Bruges, Eveline, Frank? Do you have any experience with that situation with the data which is obtained from different sources?
What we have learned in Bruges, we have also tried to obtain data from third parties, is that it is not that easy, because we have a specific third party who really did not want to share their data. It was also on mobility, because it might give insight into their business model. And so we didn't manage. It was not possible to integrate data for our local pilot development. So that's also something we learned, that you cannot always come to a cooperation with a third party if data is concerned.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense. Joanna, I guess you're also here. From your point of view, what kind of experience have you heard about in dealing also with other organizations regarding this kind of responsibility? Whose responsibility it is to take care of things like GDPR?
So, well, I mean, in terms of GDPR, the GDPR is a risk mitigation approach. So in any circumstance, there's not going to be a situation at which you say, okay, somebody else is dealing with the GDPR for me, because at any point you have to say, what are the potential risks here for the way I'm using this data and for the people I'm working with? And what steps, therefore, I need to take. And those could be completely different from the steps that the other party with that data needs to take, especially if, as is likely, you are doing something different with the data than they were. So there isn't, I don't think, so much anything like, okay, you are managing the GDPR, you're responsible for it. Once the data comes to us, it's somehow GDPR approved. Because, you know, the GDPR is always about both the data and the purpose, the use of the data. So those two things related depend on whether what you need to consider in terms of the GDPR. So I think that's, you know, there may well be disagreements. My point kind of there would be is, does there need to be an agreement? No, you need to be comfortable that you are taking the appropriate steps to mitigate any risk of breaching data privacy at your end with what you are doing with the data, regardless of what everybody else is doing. If you do feel, obviously, that that the third party you're working with, you're getting the data from, is managing its data with regard to GDPR insufficiently, so that any data that you are receiving from them is already so problematic that you will never be able to conform to the requirements of the regulation, then that is a problem. And in terms of the responsibility for the quality of data, this is a really interesting point, isn't it? Because whether you approach another organization and they share data with you, or whether you are using open data, there is always a point at which, and I know this is going to sound like I'm sitting on the fence again, but you also have to be responsible for the quality of the data that you are putting into anything that you are doing, because there is no arbitrary single standard for what is quality data. Data can be very poor quality if it's beautiful and clean, but it's missing important outliers. So for instance, perhaps it doesn't tell you, perhaps the data about cycle mobility only focuses on, I have no idea why I would do this, but as an example, the busiest 8 hours of the day. And from the point of view of the person who's sharing that data, they're like, this is the most important data about the busiest 8 hours, but it's important to know about all 24 hours. Therefore, that data, even if it's lovely and clean and perfect and usable in many ways, is low quality because it doesn't have all 24 hours. So because there is no, again, single standard of quality data, you both have to be responsible for it. And the city certainly in both cases has to be responsible for mitigating its own risk towards its citizens and towards the local government.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. That's a very clear answer. Any comments on this?
Well, perhaps I can respond. So I completely agree with what Johanna just shared on the responsibility and on the quality of the data. What I find interesting, though, is there are a lot of these, you can have agreements when it comes to use of third-party data, of course, where you agree upon the GDPR compliancy of a third party when collecting the data and when to use the data for the purpose that we are going to use it for. But in what I experienced, not specifically in this case though, is that sometimes we think we have an agreement and we rely upon a document that states that a third party is indeed collecting or using the data or is using the data GDPR compliant, but in fact is not. And we find out when we already started, for example. And that is, I think, quite problematic, specifically when you go to this kind of innovative piloting kind of way of cooperation. And I'm curious to hear what you think, how cities could deal with these things. Should we be Sherlock Holmes always?
Would this, Hester, would this be an example, for instance, such as they claim to have appropriate consents, but they don't?
Exactly.
Right. This is going to be challenging, especially when you're kind of, I see it a lot with data where, for instance, people are collecting surveillance type data, sensor data, but because it's not CCTV, or because it's not, they don't interpret what that sensor is collecting as personal data. They don't have appropriate signage up in advance, or they don't treat it as personal data. And yeah, then there is, you do get this situation where I think that all you can really do is say, well, is take a call on, well, we don't actually believe that meets our standards and therefore we can't use it. Can we potentially work with that third party to help improve it? If you're a city, if it is something like, we don't believe you've got the correct information about sensors up, then that's something you can definitely, potentially work with that third party to help them collect those implied consents. But yeah, that's a challenging area.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I can add that I think it's also a challenge for the cities themselves, because there is often a lack of knowledge. So when it comes to collecting data, when it comes to GDPR compliancy, and I think it's something that cities really need to invest in to be able to mitigate those risks when it comes to use of third-party data.
Sure. And we shouldn't forget, you know, when it is a city, if the city requires to be able to use that data for its, you know, for carrying out its services, or in the legitimate interest of its citizens, that is a right for processing data. It's a legal basis for processing data. We don't want to abuse that, but at the same point, we shouldn't forget that that legal basis exists.
Okay, thank you so much. I think there is still some room for some legal advice here, and that's something we might actually, in what the time is left for the SCIFI project, we might want to have a check on that one, maybe via also one of our partners, Agoria, to actually check out this specific point, so that we also can add some directions into the cookbook on this point. Hester, was this question one, or was this already question two?
Well, I think they are related. When it comes to question two, I can perhaps share that we found a difference in interpreting the GDPR with regards to a single data set between two cities in the Netherlands already, which is, I think, a challenge. We collect data with sensors that are in our roads near the traffic lights, and it collects basically the data on when a light is red, orange, or green, and in those time zones or color zones, if a vehicle crosses in those time or color zones, yes or not. It doesn't on itself is not a personal data set. So one city that is close to Delft stated, we see this as open data and we want to use it if we want to build a digital twin and we want to gain more insight on mobility flows using these data sets. Well, in Delft, we said, no, we see this as a personal data set, because if we read the GDPR and the interpretation that the Netherlands gave to it as well, we think that it is a personal data set because it's easily made personal by certain parties that could use the data. So for example, an insurance company that wants to use these data to see if there's a case of, there's an accident, and both parties that were in the accident claim that they've gone through the green light, which isn't possible if you look at the situation. And they want to use, the insurance company wants to use the data of the city to see who is right and who is wrong. And they can easily do it by adding the data set of the city on top of the data set of themselves. And our privacy officer stated, we think because it's that easy, it is a personal data set and thus it's not open data. So we see there are different interpretations even within the Netherlands between two cities of the GDPR when it comes to opening up data. I think this is a challenge that I think maybe other cities face as well, but I think could also influence the actual value that you can create with opening up data. I'm curious if other cities or other people that are in this call have experienced the same, and what are the opinions about this?
We have not exactly had the same experience, but I would like to give my opinion on it. I think the first thing that you need to know when you're collecting the data is for what will we use it. And if you actually want to use it for something, okay, that's step one. If you don't want to use it, then it's not that important. But then the second step is to be, it's better to be a bit more cautious in regards to the GDPR when opening up your data, because if you're too overzealous and you start sharing data about your citizens that are, well, too revealing, then it's really hard to take that back, and the fines are enormous. So unless you have a really, really specific goal for the personal data that you're collecting, or well, the personal data that some people say is personal data and some people don't say it's personal data, unless you have a really, really good reason to do it, then I would always advise as much caution as possible.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Any last comments? Because looking at the time, we're ready to go to the second topic. Anyone?
Just to say that that is a really great example of how sensor data can be personal data, even though you're just looking at, you know, crossing a light at its set at the whatever the light is set to, the color it's set to. So that's a really great example of that.
Okay, thank you, Hester. Last word.
No, thank you for your comments and discussion, and I'm really looking forward to the next.
Okay, thank you very
Hester,
much.
just a small thing. Have you considered maybe skewing the data in a way that it's impossible to trace it within 5 minutes or something? Because then it's virtually impossible to link it to a person at that time.
Yeah, those are some things we're discussing at the moment. But then the question is if it's still usable for other purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good one.
Yeah, I'm interested in the outcome either way.
I will keep you updated.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Hester, for the introduction, and the others also for the discussion on this topic. So we're moving on. I'm just going back to where we started off. So we'll be talking now for the second part on interoperability, a word which just recently I was able to pronounce, but not yet in French. So therefore we'll move to Alexandre to have the first, and I'll actually give you the floor, Alexandre. So 1 second. Let me see, there we are, and then I go remote control. Alexandre, where are you? Here. Alexandre, if everything is okay, bonjour, you are able to control it yourself now.
I don't know, I can test. Okay.
There you are.
Yes, sorry. And also, yes, too sensitive. So yes, interoperability is a difficult word.
Alexandre, you have to take a bit more distance from your mic because you're.
I have a headset, so I cannot. So.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, just try again.
I can do. Normally it's for iPhone, so it will work. So I tried. So perhaps if I don't touch my head, will be more better.
Yeah, and just talk not too loud. Then it's okay.
Okay, so just interoperability. Yes, it's a big word, very difficult to pronounce, especially in English for me as French. So, and what I want to do is to just yes, to highlight this issue through the implementation of a digital solution we designed in Saint-Quentin in order to answer the need of green space department. They pursue the objective to modernize the management of maintenance operation in the stadium, so mainly watering or mowing. So the department needs are very simple to understand with two objectives. first make water consumption more parsimonious by adapting it as closely as possible to the real needs of the grass. So mainly for us, it's a question of removing two recurrent problems: is one, overwatering of the soil, and secondly, difficulty to maintain sufficient humidity level. And the second objective is just to simplify the maintenance operation thanks to a remote system that sends instruction and coordinate the action of different equipment located in a stadium, like a lawn mower or sprinklers. Thanks to, when we fulfill these two objectives, we want to achieve two goals. So just reduce water consumption and also save times and suppress daily travel of the staff to program operation. So the problem is in order to implement a digital solution that match these user needs, we have to satisfy a long list of very technical challenges. So one, we have to define a watering strategy based on the real needs of the grass. So, and to quantify these needs of water, it is required to develop an objective measure of the soil moisture with IoT device. We have also to mash up this information with additional environmental parameter like a weather forecast or some evapotranspiration concept, and also we have to give to the team information on the current status of the stadium and some insight on the action to carry on with an application as a decision base for define the watering strategy or sensor maintenance. We have also to gather additional information in order to identify the appropriate strategy. Water needs is not enough. We have to mash up with, we have to connect to the IT city system in order to collect data sets like planning occupation of stadium. We also need to determine a sequencing protocol to trigger the sprinkles one by one because we have a problem of low pressure on our stadium. And the final technical issue to solve is to apply remotely and automatically the watering plan we have decided. So, and for us, it's require the connection of the watering solution to the irrigation system in order to send instruction and make verification of the efficient application of the order. And also we have to connect the watering solution to the lawn mower to avoid possible conflict with the sprinklers. So when taking into account all this problem, we led an experimentation in the SCIFI project in order to define the digital architecture needed to satisfy all these constraints. First, we conducted a learning by doing process with the local startup Element.io to co-develop with the user of Green Space department the two layer of the watering solution itself. So an IoT system to provide an objective measure of the water need, and also the application to get the information of the current status of the stadium and some insight on the operation to carry on. In parallel, we made a sort of cooperative agreement with two historical partners of Saint-Quentin, mainly Faubourg Numérique, which is also involved in SCIFI, and also the telco Orange. And the objective of this agreement was for us to specify the kind of digital infrastructure needed to support the integration of the watering solution and it's very important. Its interconnection with the rest of the city infrastructure, because the solution have to discuss and to be in connection, to interact with other system like IT system of the city, the incumbent irrigation system, and also the lawn mower. So in fact, the experimentation allows the city to leverage some learnings about the technical and organizational aspect needed to implement city as a platform concept in real. And finally, the last step for us is to scale up through the procurement of an interoperable solution. And so you can see the picture of the result of the procurement that we launched in beginning of this year, and we want to deploy on the nine stadium of the city of Saint-Quentin with 2 partners, mainly Hostabee, local IoT startup, and Easy Global Market, SME, specialized in a platform in the fiber ecosystem. So mainly the solution include three different layers. So we have the southbound layer, which include 6 sensors that monitor in real time the soil moisture in each stadium. It's the objective, because we want to separate each stadium in different parcels. We have also the actuator on the field that's allowed to start and stop the sprinklers, and we have also lawn mower. So at the northbound layer, we have the remote management application that's allowed to monitor stadium status and manage maintenance operation remotely. All these things are managed by Hostabee in link with the system of the city. And we have also other layer regarding external data source that are mainly coming from the city or other provider like weather forecast or the occupation padding of the stadium. And finally, at the middle, we have a middleware layer, which is the data platform built around an open standard, NGSI, and various extensions like a connector to communicate with data in other format, data storage space, data module to visualize data. And really, in fact, when we procure this architecture, your main challenge was to define a kind of architecture that is interoperable by design. Indeed, the watering solution will produce a low added value or will not run at its full potential without such a data platform that allows us to aggregate, compare, merge, and reuse data coming from heterogeneous sources and systems. And in fact, the idea was to don't have a solution that is working alone and separately of the ecosystem of the city with other system. So for us, it was a huge challenge for us to define this kind of interoperable architecture, as we don't have any previous experiences, nor with data platform or IoT. And passing this kind of challenge, we leverage some the main insight from the technical framework of the synchronicity, the large-scale open pilot on IoT, and other partners like FIWARE and OSC that provide very good stuff to help cities to digitalize itself. So, and in fact, we can resume the interoperability in your project with three key components. One is to select an open standard for APIs. For us, it was NGSE LD. In order to be sure that all systems involved in the project are using a common language. In fact, we also secondly announce enhance the compatibility and potential for interoperability with the standard, thanks to additional connector that allow us to convert other possible language into the common one selected. It's mainly the case for IoT device, which use mainly LoRa or Sigfox, and we need to translate this protocol in NGSI. And the last condition to have a common language for us is to use harmonized data model shared by all stakeholders in order to interconnect the various systems that are engaged in the project. So that's all for my presentation, to highlight the role of interoperability in operating a smart city service.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. Let me just take back the screen. Does it work? Yeah. 1 second. Okay. Any questions to Alexander on what he just told us on interoperability and the choices they have made in Saint-Quentin to make this work before we head on to the next speaker? I'm aware that in many cities, especially also in the Netherlands, many of these things are outsourced to commercial parties and to other organizations, and therefore it's not always that it's needed to integrate in the systems of the municipality itself, but it also is the same story, of course, with external companies when they have their infrastructure. So on itself, it really makes sense. Okay, I think the next one was Vincent. Is that correct?
Yes, Vincent.
Yes. So I'm gonna give you the screen. 1 second. Vincent, where are you in my list? Here you are. So normally you should be able to control it now.
Yes, I think it starts. It's working. So, well, just a few words to complement what Alexander said before, and some words about the concept of interoperability. Because also about what you said, Franz, the challenge here is to not only open the data, but also to open the systems that are managed in the cities, and it's a common situation that the description of the architecture of the digital tools and equipment in a city are described in a city or in any kind of organization are described as silos, and one of the usual problem is that each system, each specialized system is usually very efficient and very designed for a specific task. But when you want to make all these systems interact together and have interaction between one system and other system, it's usually a problem. And it leads to finally poor efficiency at the global level, and for sure the problem is that there is no openness and no flexibility of these systems, and this leads also to costly evolutions of the global architecture. And that's the purpose of interoperability, to make this system more open and to provide the capacity of the systems to communicate and to interact. So if we take this example in the city of Saint-Quentin, so what Alexander showed before, it was necessary to make the existing system to communicate with each other, especially the watering system, which is automated. Oh, it's going too fast. Sorry. Okay. So the main part of the system, of course, is the automated watering system that must take into account information and also instruction coming from other systems, especially the reservation calendar. You must be aware when there are football matches, for instance, and also when it is planned to trigger the robotic lawnmower, and also, of course, to optimize the usage of the water to take into account the weather forecast. So to make this work, what Alexandre also described is that it's a strong decision of the city. So instead of developing, let's say, a standalone application, they have decided to implement an interoperable platform in order to virtualize the different assets and not to break the silos, but to connect the silos with each other. And this platform is also designed to have the capacity to virtualize any kind of system. And then based on this platform, it's possible to develop advanced services like the supervision tools. And it's going too fast again, sorry. Whoa. I go back to the previous slides. And one of the challenge is also to avoid the vendor locking. So if one part of the system is changing, if you change the contract, if you change also the provider, if you change the technology, the platform is remaining, and the global system, let's say, is able to be adapted in a more easier way, in an easiest way. And it's also a possibility to, thanks to this, also to have this definition of a common language to ease the engagement of local SMEs and to structure the procurement policies. And this structuration is based on two main pillars. The first one is the standard API to interact with the different systems. And also, it's important, this is really the common language that we talked before, and maybe we will talk again later, is the harmonized data model. And also, to make the link with the previous discussion, to have this data model is also something important to define the different levels of responsibilities. So that's it for the, let's say, the structure and the architecture. I think now it's interesting to see how the point of view of an SME, so Hostabee, how they leverage this architecture and this interoperability concepts. So I let the floor to Maxime, I guess.
Thank you, Vincent. Any questions on the presentation of Vincent before we move to Hostabee? Any similar experiences in other cities regarding this part? So it's all about the standard API and a harmonized data model, I've learned today. Okay, let's move then. Let me just. There he is, remote control. Let me just see. And then let me see. So Maxime, I've actually given you control of the presentation. Maxime still there? I can't hear you. I think we lost Maxime. No, you're still there, but you're muted.
And now?
Yeah, it's okay, loud and clear. You can operate the screen on the left. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. So what do you prefer? Very good French or very bad English?
I think it's still easier for us to have it in very bad English than in very good French. So
I'm Maxime, founder and CEO of Hostabee, a French company developing technology to support transition towards a sustainable economy. So Hostabee is currently active in 3 domains. The first one in environment, management and biodiversity protection. Secondly, in the water and irrigation management. And last but not least, in food life cycle management. And okay, just there. Okay, good. Since the creation of Hostabee in 2015, our solutions are all powered by fireware technology. And our strategy is to deliver solutions that are interoperable by design. So we mainly focus on the business needs and the value added value usage. And you can now easily adapt the combination of the hardware and the communication, the customer, and now with this technology to address the customers' requirements and to build up and deliver advanced services. Okay. From a technical point of view, we leverage the open source tools, especially NJSI LD standard that is implemented by fireware enablers, and that's benefits from a large and growing community of the developers and users. So the strength of this standard is the simplicity. Each equipment is virtualized by a corresponding entity, and the entity has a set of property and value. And finally, there are relationships between the entities. And Hostabee has used the technology to transform the existing equipment, like the watering system in Saint-Quentin, the rainbow systems, using a very specific and close interfaces. And we transform this into an interoperable system using NJSI proxy to connect to the urban platform. So Hostabee use the same technology also to build a data warehouse fed by the urban platform, allowing to deliver dashboards and decision-making support to monitor the watering system. And thanks to the interoperability, all the data managed by our solution are owned by the customers. In this case, it's the city of Saint-Quentin. So we are convinced that interoperability it's a competitive advantage for us and especially for the smart city sector. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maxime. Your English is excellent, so perfect. And I think with the 3 presentations from Saint-Quentin, we basically had a good overview of the different partners in the project and how you work together on an open system. I was wondering, any experiences with this working on open systems from the other cities? Is there anything you'd like to share? Did you come to similar solutions, like focusing on a standard API and on a harmonized data model? or did you see other solutions, or did you find problems because you didn't work in that way? Any experiences? What it also shows is that the first presentation from Hester was all about data, and this one is really about sensors and really technology. In a couple of levels in technology working together. This already shows also what we see in SCIFI. So we're talking about not only about data and dashboards and management information, business intelligence, we're talking also about the implementation of systems, like the presentation we just had. And we talk about the data itself, and we also talk about procurement. So SCIFI is all encompassing these kind of aspects of solutions which we try to develop. So it's really a different view on it. Well, if there are no questions, then I'll move on. By the way, this whole presentation will become available online also, because it's recorded. So if you ever want to look back. And finally, again, I can state that we will be actually having this, of course, in the cookbook. All this information is coming back in the cookbook. All right.
I do have a question though, Fons.
Go ahead. Jan.
No experiences, but a question. So I saw that the field reservations were also linked to the whole solution. Was that a problem to do so, or was it already a workable API that could be linked with your system?
Who would you like to ask it to?
Yeah, Alexander or Vincent. I don't know who. I don't know who will know the answer. The reason I'm asking is because I can imagine that a lot of these systems that are a bit older aren't easily linkable between the IoT platform or the digital twin or whatever that you'd like to make. So I was wondering if anyone had experience with an outdated system that keeps a lot of data that is not easily transferable to another system.
Yeah, Vincent is speaking. I don't know if Alexandre is there, but I can confirm that as you said, Jan, the existing, let's say, old-fashioned systems are probably the most difficult to connect, and it's also something. Let's say it's a change. It requires change management in the way the people are, let's say, managing this kind of systems. And well, yes, it's. I don't know if Alexandre can also say a few words about this, but you know, it's still they still have to extract CSV files and transfer the data in through FTP and things like that. So it's not really API, but yes, you're right. It's something painful and something. It's part of the digitalization process and the change management in the city services, I guess.
It's because of that. When I made my presentation, I said that we had some connector that's allow the conversion of data in from other language to another one. So, for example, we have a connector for CSV. So it allows us to take some data from our IT system of the city that we export. We made an export in CSV, and after the platform is able to take this data and use them, but at certain, so we can go with this kind of platform very far, and we are able to take a lot of data from other encumbered system, but we go to the first point of the session is that you have to be able at certain point to be to have the capacity to take the data of other systems. So if you are not able or don't have the contract that allow you to collect, to gather your data in your incumbent system in CSV, you are blocked. Yes. For example, we spend many time in another project to have the canteen menu. It's a project in canteen, city canteen for child. And we have some menu composition, and we spend many time to know how to translate the data and reuse them, because the format is not very good. So if you are able to secure an access in CSV to many of your data, you can be able to integrate them in this kind of platform.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Vincent. Looking at the clock, I propose to move on to the next chapter, and that's all about digital twins and intelligence. And I think Eveline is the first one to kick off, so I'm gonna share the screen with you, which I have to click one thing for, and there it's yours. Eveline, floor is yours.
Thank you, Fons. Let's just have a look. Yes. So this will be a short introduction on the Bruges pilot and the experience on digital twin and intelligence. The case that we had put forward in a pilot project was primarily focused on the installation of an efficient smart waste management system. I have actually brought Frank, who will do the talking for this presentation for Bruges. He will give you an insight on how our pilot is working in various levels, creating a digital twin for Bruges, how we elaborate with other possible data, or how we could elaborate with other possible data, and how the use of the available data for other city departments and policy domains could be of interest. So Frank is here from Waste Vision, and he will go into depth about digital twin and intelligence in the Bruges case. So Fons, you will have to share the screen again with Frank, if you could please. Thank you.
I will. Thank you for the introduction. I have to stop the control for you, and then I can give Frank Mokveld the control. And Frank, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to tell something about what we are doing in the city of Bruges. Let's see. I think it's there. Yes. What we want to tell you is what we are doing at the moment in Bruges to see what the status is at this moment. Also, what we are talking and thinking about for the possibilities to add extra data sets to a system to make it more efficient, and to see what is horizontal extension to see can you use the system also for other work what the city does. And to start with what we are doing in the city of Bruges, we had a little delay due to COVID-19, as we were not allowed for a long time to travel from the Netherlands to Belgium. But finally, we have equipped the 105 waste bins with a radar sensor, which was new for us, a radar sensor. The fill level measurement and prediction is active. We use the dynamic planning and routing now, and the waste collectors do the collection of the waste bins with navigation application from us. And what we have done is about 105 bins are equipped, and there are different types of bins. This is one of the bins which is installed, a very difficult one actually, as it was very small. We see this, it's very common also in the Netherlands. In total, we have equipped about 5 different types of public bins with the same type of sensor. We have implemented them in the software, where you can see on the map where it is in Bruges. And on the next page, we will see a small table or a table, but it is very small. I think it's not possible to, I'm sorry, to zoom in. But what you see here is every type of bin. They have a unique number, they have a unique name and a location. And the type of bin is also defined there with the device identifier, which is in the bin, and also for which fraction it is. What we have also done is added a couple of stops which need to be checked weekly or twice a week for what they call in Belgium sluikstort. It is for, in Dutch it's zwerfafval. It's for garbage which is next to a container, next to a public bin, hotspots of waste actually. And they're planned, scheduled, so they're coming on the planning every week. What we see here is more detailed information from the sensor, so we can see how a sensor is filling up. We started with, when we started, we had to tune the algorithm of the radar sensor, because the radar sensor needs to ignore the plastic bag which is in a waste bin. And well, we did that in a couple of times. Last time yesterday. So it's continuous improvement on that part as well to give the best measurements. And what we see here is well, the information about the container, but also how fast it is filling. So that's what we use for our forecasting for the predictive model from based on historical data. And what we see is that in average now the public bins in Bruges are filling up in 4.2 days. That means that in the ideal situation you only have to empty them every 4.2 days. Well, in the zero situation, it was that the public bins were all visited 3 times a week. So every 2.5 days, they came there to empty a public bin. What we also see is on which days of the week are they mostly used. Is that in a weekend or is that in during a day? And we are not looking yet to, but I will come to that afterwards, to the weather forecast, for example. These are all the measurements of a public bin, and all those measurements come up in a planning. And the planning, and I don't know if this works, but this is a capacity planning, and this will say when you need to empty a bin. And there are 102 bins equipped with the sensor. We have a just-in-time percentage of 75%, which means that the city of Bruges wants to have the bin emptied before it reaches a level of 75%. So that's also a little bit of risk taking. If you go up to 100%, for example, then well, there's a chance the bin will overflow with waste. Then here we see the coming days, and we see how many bins needs to be emptied on every day. And we also see that they have a service shift available. But there are full bins on Saturday and on Sunday, but they don't have people who empty the public bins on these days. So these orders need to be emptied earlier, or if possible, they need to be pushed to the Monday. And there is a small movie, well, I don't know, Fons, can you play it or not on your
Ah oui, je viens de voir ça, j'ai regardé là. International. Ah, c'est international. Après les classes, ouais, j'ai pas vérifié ça.
No, it's...
Vincent, your mic is still on.
It's Maxime.
Maxime, your mic is still on. So I don't think we can play the video.
Pourquoi? Colonne chromatographique à usage scientifique et laboratoire.
Okay.
Substance chimique.
Let me just, can I just, Frank, can I just have the mouse for a moment?
Parce que c'est venu à l'idée, parce que là, je suis en train de faire mes devants.
Because I have to mute Maxime. So, go ahead.
Okay, thank
Frank.
you. You can still hear me. Okay.
Sure.
Well, after the orders are planned, automatically the routes will be made for every shift, and then you see which containers needs to be emptied, but also how do you have to drive. And the waste collector uses a mobile application from us on a tablet to drive to every stop and to say that he has emptied the bin. So what we see now is that they empty about 30% less, 35% less of the bins than they did before. So that's quite some result. What we are thinking about for extra data sets, extra open data sets, we ourselves, we use OpenStreetMaps, for example, as an open data set to be able to do adjustments to the card material ourselves and not be in the need for a TomTom or Navtec or a company like that. We want to be more in control. And the possibilities is what we are doing now is that we are bringing in traffic information. That's something we already we do, but it's also possible to import specific city information for work that is in progress, for streets that are rebuilt, or if there is a special event or a special holiday. Well, in the Netherlands, we know the phenomenon King's Day, then it's very different. There's a lot of waste then, and if you have that information, you can do more with the predictive model to see what is happening and what is going to happen. What is also possible is to use data sets for crowd determination based on the number of parked vehicles in a city like Bruges, or if there is information about the number of pedestrians in a certain area. Weather forecast can be possible, but at this moment we haven't discussed this data sets to implement data sets like this and with City of Bruges, and we don't know if they are available. Well, and I heard before in this already a discussion about open data sets, if it's possible to use something or not. So that can be interesting. In other parts for other clients, we see that they're also happening a lot with COVID-19. Municipal house waste is more and more as restaurants and pubs are closed and people are working from home, but public bins then are more empty. So that's can be interesting for to do something, still to do something with. Then horizontal extension. What can you use this system for? You've seen it's all about planning of orders, about forecasting, and what you can do is other waste collection services to optimize. It's also possible to use it for inspection or testing rounds, for example, for street lighting work to be performed that is planned on the basis of orders. actually, well, you can use it for everything which is based on orders. You can put in the parameters. For example, for one worker can do 50 orders or on a day, or 20 or 30, or it can do 20 orders, but you also need to take into account the travel time between his stops. Other modules are for asset management and maintenance on public services, public assets, and it's also possible to do GPS tracking for non-powered assets, as there is also a GPS sensor in the sensor. Well, I think that was what I wanted to share with you. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. Well, I have a couple of things to remark, but I'm just wanted to give the floor to anyone else who wants to react, has ideas, questions on the presentation of Frank. Anyone? If not, then I'll react. The nice thing of this project is that we have a similar project in Delft. In the first round of Accelerator last year, we did also a project on smart waste. So it's a nice thing also to start comparing the approaches. And also here I see one example is that you have projects which we tested, which are really about automation, which are like the watering. It's really also about automation. Here we are already talking about something which is making the routes more efficient, for instance. And we also see, for instance, the one we're doing now in Delft and the one on de-icing last year, which is clearly only about artificial intelligence, using all kind of data to come up with predictions. And the level of that AI is different, but they're all smart city solutions which we're implementing. And one question I have to you, Frank, is that in Delft we do have, of course, 4,000 baskets bins. So the 105, is that, are they representing a larger number? So are some of them indicative for more, or is it really are we really talking about just 105? And if the whole of Bruges wants to, you have to actually put sensors in every bin.
Yes, you have to put in sensors in every bin. That's because, well, as you probably could see, in every bin has its own pattern, fill pattern. And one bin is full every 2 days, but another bin is full every 5 days. And it depends on the location where the bin is and how much pedestrians and people are crossing that the bin are using that bin. So what we see also in other cities now is that they equip all the bins with sensors. Sensors that communicate, are measuring every hour, and are communicating 6 times a day their data.
Yeah, I think what helps at this moment, at least, is that sensors are getting cheaper and cheaper. So I think that that helps also in the in rolling out more and more of these numbers, because when they're very expensive, of course, it's a big investment. And I think the things you mentioned before is adding things like the weather and events and these kind of things really make sense in this model, and therefore the intelligence of these systems will get bigger and bigger, and also using all historical data to help in better predictions. Okay, so any questions now at this moment, or suggestions or other experiences?
So I would like to, not a question, but a reaction.
Hi, Silke.
Yeah, hi. So I am familiar with the project case in Delft as well, where it was more with geo information than a sensor in every bin. the city of Bruges actually chose to do a sensor in every bin because of our historical appeal and the tourist and so forth. We wanted to absolutely not be in the case of having bins overflowing. So we wanted that pre-activeness, that element that Waste Vision absolutely gave to us. So that predictive modeling of we predict that this bin will be full by Saturday. So we suggest a route that empties the bin on Thursday or on Friday was a perfect answer to that. Not only that, so now the predictive modeling is firmly on historical data, but we are also looking into digital twins with the city of Bruges. So if we could combine the historical data and the actual data, the actual data from Waste Vision, for example, with our plans to do the traffic data and how do you call it? The parking data, the footfall data. If we could combine all of that, imagine what sort of predictive modeling we could do. You're still muted, Fons.
I'm too muted. Thank you very much, Silke. Yeah, that's a good addition to what Frank told, and it really makes sense. And yeah, it's good to in the cookbook also we will be sharing all these learnings from this, and there is always sometimes you make trade-offs, and they're also often based on the specific policy of the municipality. What are their objectives and what are their specific priorities. So we try to actually get a complete view on this, and therefore sometimes in this case I like very much the different approaches. By the way, for 80% it's a bit of the same direction, because at the end of the day a bin is a bin, huh? So garbage is garbage. But anyway, very good. Thank you very much. I will now continue in this topic of digital twin and intelligence. I think Vincent, you had also a couple of slides to share with us.
Yes.
So I will actually give you then again the control. Let me see, where are you in my list? Here you are. There you go.
Okay, again, just a few words to complement what has been said before. And in general, the concept of digital twin is here to address the necessity to have, let's say, a global approach to manage the city assets and the processes. And this digital twin approach is usually the goal is to answer to question about the reality, what is the actual situation, and to address this kind of question that you can see on the screen. What has also been said is that it's important that there is this concept of, let's say, real-time interaction between the real world and the virtual world, in order to interact and to have this capacity of data correlation and modeling the behaviors of all the system, and then to send back instruction and actuation, instruction to the real world. So that's the usual approach, and let's say a picture of what are the purpose of the digital twin approach. And again, I would like to insist on the main importance of the data models, and that's the slides already shown by Maxime about the modeling of the virtualization of the real assets, and the discussion you had before about what represents a bin. Is it the bin itself, or it's a group of bin? Let's say a representative group of bin, or each bin has its own sensors. So it's something that must be defined also and must be clear in the data model. And that's why, again, it's the first very important and to structure this data model and to have finally also, if I can go to the next slide, yes. What we said before, a common language to clearly specify the relationship between the different entities and assets of the cities, and the importance to have this capacity to build up and share knowledge based on data, and to have this structure of data in order to be able to have a clear view about the quality of this data, of what is representing this data. And again, this can be done through the data model. And it's also important when you have, I think something that we heard also in this session is that we are trying to create a kind of micro community of cities to share knowledge about the data models. And also in Saint-Quentin, there is a project, it's not part of the SCIFI project, but related to waste management. And also we have to control, they have to control the quantities of food waste in school restaurants. And so basically the entities, as the font said, the bin is a bin, but the way you use it is different. And this must be represented in the data model. And again, with the goal to have a common view about this digital twin and the knowledge that will be built up above this layer. So that's it for me. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Vincent, for your input. I'm going to, if I have a chance, you have to lose your mouse now because otherwise okay. I cannot take it. I cannot take it over. I like that one. All right. So I'm back. Thank you for the addition to the story on digital twins. I think the whole digital twin discussion is getting bigger and bigger. I know in our area, the province of South Holland is starting a kind of project also with European money on a platform for digital twins. And I think that, as you know, we are currently in a project on bike mobility. The basis of digital twins for all the cities will be starting to use. And of course, what Vincent just said is regarding the definition of objects should be very unambiguous. Everybody should exactly know what it means. And if we do that well, then we will be actually in the future, in my view, be able to model many things which happen today in cities in the digital twin, which help us in policy making and also in operations, as we have seen a couple examples already today. Any questions, additions, anything you want to comment on this topic before I introduce the last topic of today? Okay, if everybody's happy.
Perhaps me.
Oh, Alexander, go ahead.
Yes, just what is the minimum element required that you need in order to ensure the continuity of interoperability in the long run? As for example, if you take the procurement policy in general for platform data platform, there is exception, but the horizon is very short. Yes, for example, we procure for the data platform for the watering project. It's for 2 years. We can extend for up to 4 years max, because it's the law, the legal requirement. But this kind of digital infrastructure with a digital twin and so on, it's more a big infrastructure that you want to use more than 2 or 4 years. So as we have to make a new procurement at the end of the 4 year, my question is if you want to secure your infrastructure in the long run, what is the requirement? Because I am not sure.
Well, I think, Alexander, that will differ, of course, from country to country still, although we are one Europe, but there's still the differences. I think it's similar if you are investing in, for instance, SAP. This is also not something what you just use for a year or 2 years or 3. You're probably going to use that for 10 years or longer. So there are probably specific procurement rules and tendering rules around these kind of things, which you have to adhere to. So I don't know whether there is a common rule for that, but maybe from the other cities, any experience with that? Maybe in Bruges or in Mechelen? So it's certainly something to be worked out. I think there are 2 things to mention here. One is whereas it's a normal tendering process, we all, well, what we're used to, and there are all kind of European rules also. And as we are all using equipment, for instance, we bought in Delft de-icing equipment, so machines to clean the streets of ice. You don't buy them for a year, you buy them probably for 15 years or even longer, or 20 years. So I think that these regulations are set. The different story is when we talk about innovative procurement, wherein we say we develop something like we did in the pilots with an external company, and we want to continue working with that solution. And then we're talking about innovative partnerships and other kind of solutions. And I think we're going to mention some of that also in the cookbook. We have built up some experience, but there is also more experience available from other sources. And I know for the Netherlands, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, they have a unit called Piano with double O. And they actually gather and bring together all knowledge on innovative procurement in the public sector. And maybe we have these kind of institutes also in Belgium and France and the UK. What we certainly will do is that we will mention within the cookbook also references to these kind of organizations for those people who want to engage with that. But that's a bit my point of view on this topic. Anyone else who wants to react on the question regarding procurement?
Yes, no, but you can answer about procurement, but also one other way to answer this question is perhaps technical. Yes, that perhaps Vincent have an idea on how to ensure the from a technical point of view the continuity of services when you have the possibility to move to a platform to another because of procurement and something like. Yes, perhaps there is a minimum of technical requirement. I don't know.
Well, I would say in general terms, it's better to bid on open source technology, or at least open standards. Then you are not locked to vendor. But I guess it's a general approach for. But it's also important to integrate this in the policy. Of course, I guess that it's something in general that a public organization should take should ask as a requirement to base the solution on maybe not open source always, but if possible on open source, and at least on open standards and not proprietary technology. And that's also the kind of problem that has been discussed before with legacy systems. When you want to make a legacy system communicate with another, you are in a way locked because you don't know how it works from technical point of view. I don't know if it's really an operational answer, but I think it's also from experiences that we had in the different projects.
Okay, well, thank you, Vincent. I'd like to move on to the last speaker of today, Jan Vanbockrijck, regarding the topic of infrastructure and the use case from Mechelen. Jan, I'm gonna give you the control, and there you go.
Thank you, Fons. I'm going to talk to you a bit more about the air quality pilot that we did in Mechelen. We didn't have a pilot this year, so I had to find something from the previous year. In the pilots, we wanted to improve and monitor the air quality in our city. And we did that by placing sensors in different key locations. And we also combined that with a weather station. And with all those sensors in the weather station, we were able to track multiple gases, the temperature, the particulate matter, humidity, and noise levels. And all that data was real time and open, presented in dashboards for the city departments as well as the city. And it was also machine readable by Orion Context Broker. Unfortunately, the pilot didn't go exactly as planned, and that is something I would like to touch on here. So first off, we had some problems with the installation. And we came to the conclusion that plug and play is the exception when dealing with these kinds of things. So even when there's a power source available, this doesn't mean that it will work in all cases. So for instance, we were hooking up our sensors to a lamppost, which isn't the same as plugging it into a how do you say stop contact in English? Well, just plugging it into a wall like you would do for a phone charger. And that just didn't work. We had a lot of malfunctioning because the electrical grid wasn't exactly suited for it. And what was also something that came up is that the location is really important. So building further on what we had, power isn't always readily available at the location that you intend to place a sensor, and you might have to find a solution for that. An option is not to use the power, to use batteries, but then you have another problem that you have to replace a battery, or that's simply not possible for some higher end applications that need a lot of power. And what we also found was that the best location for a sensor might be private property. So that it's an all other deal. You can't just go to a citizen and say, hey, we need your power right now, or we need your place to put the sensor. So my question on this to the public is, do you have any experience when placing physical sensors in the public domain? Did you have any problems with that, or solutions to those problems?
Anyone? Maybe I can add one thing here, Jan, is that when we did something on smart waste last year, we actually and we implemented for the pilot sensors in the waste bins, and I don't know whether Bruges has the same experience, but we informed the police about that up front, because it was an external company doing this from Belgium actually, and then we had also Italians involved, so we had a whole bunch of people making things in waste bins, and we thought there might be people who would be calling the police or so and saying, well, people are putting stuff into waste bins, and today with all kind of terrorist dangers, we wanted them to be informed that we as a municipality were doing a smart city project. That's one comment, and the second is that we have a lot of discussion within the municipality, within the council, the local council, about putting sensors everywhere in the city. So there's a whole discussion about privacy and these kind of things. So at least this is something which is really discussed in Delft. So I'm also wondering whether there are similar kind of things in other cities.
I would also like to add on the question if if the power is not readily available. So we did not have that problem with the sensor from Waste Vision, for example, because they operate with a battery. Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but in this case we weren't. It wasn't an issue. It was a non-issue. We were not. I don't know the term in English. Dependable on the power grid.
No, indeed, they have a battery in the sensor, which will last for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
And they're also quite covered in the bin. So what we've seen in Bruges is that, well, there were some people who thought, well, that's interesting, what's in it? So they took their, well, they were a little, but they are in a bracket, so they can also not really move it. So they're quite covered.
Also, I want to add for Bruges, what was an issue or what might be an issue is that we are regarding the public domain, a UNESCO protected city. So we cannot just add on to any place we want sensors, even if they are very small. So besides the privacy issues that you might encounter, that's also something we need to discuss in the near future about regulation and how we can set up pilot areas and have a low regulatory area maybe for experiments with sensor data.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's always a problem if you want to put sensors and you're not even allowed to put them on, or you run into a citizen that's not really happy to see a sensor on this property. Then the sensor might be placed in a not so ideal spot, and that might skew the data.
One thing I'd like to add regarding power availability is that last year when we did the pilot on de-icing, we spoke to a company, a startup. Well, they got quite a lot of funding already. A startup from Delft who have developed sensors which actually don't have batteries and don't need any power. They take the power from the from cell phones. So the radiation which comes from the cell phones is the power for the sensor which is placed into the street, in the asphalt, and it will be measuring all kind of things. And last year they were in the first tests with BAM, you know, a large construction company. So I think within the next 5 years we will be seeing more and more sensors which will actually take energy directly from the air in a certain sense. So maybe this problem becomes less and less an issue. All right. Any other points regarding this use case from Mechelen? Alexander.
Yes. Just to add, as we have also worked on sensor in Saint-Quentin. So yes, the location is important, but not only, is also if you put it in an object in this location, the characteristic of the object is also important. I don't know if you have problem with your bins, but with the other project, the ashtray, the project of ashtray maintenance in Saint-Quentin, we have for several months connectivity problem with the sensor. Is not because the network is air, but because we put the sensor inside a metal object, and when you have some metal, there is problem of transmission. So it don't work at the moment. I don't know if we will solve the problem, and I don't know if you have the problem with your bins or not, but yes, it's a question to have in mind.
Okay, any issues with interference there?
So I'm not aware of any interference actually. Frank, do we have connectivity problems? I don't think so.
Sorry, again. No, we never ever somewhere in the city of Bruges, well, had problems with connectivity.
Yes, it's perhaps bins are big but as ashtray is very tiny, you have to have small equipment, and perhaps it's metal. Okay.
Maybe it can be more challenging.
Yes.
But
You
also
have
there is a difference between the countries also. I know that we have quite some customers in France, and in France there are quite some white areas, as how they call them.
You mean with connectivity?
Yes.
Where there's less coverage.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at the time. Jan, were you ready or were you?
I had one more slide.
Go ahead.
Oh,
that's a good one.
That's weird.
We start again. You can just take right to that. You can pull that one and then take the one you want to use.
Oh, I apparently skipped one. Okay.
Okay.
I was wondering, it felt a little bit weird, but I actually wanted to talk about the connectivity first, but okay, fine. So what we experienced was that networks don't always work as expected. So in our case, we were first looking at which network we should use. And then we came to the conclusion that Wi-Fi and LAN isn't an option because it's not available on all locations. That might be good in something internal or something where you have a good connection to your own Wi-Fi network. So then we started looking at dedicated networks, but those can be very expensive, especially if you send a lot of data and a lot of at very regular intervals. So we actually went to the 2G and the 4G, but that also gave some problems. And so the takeaway from this is that the experience with local mobile connectivity is very important for the SMEs, because we worked with a Spanish manufacturer and we didn't anticipate this, but they had a lot of trouble getting the mobile connectivity working here. So the two questions that I would like to ask here is, what are your experiences with the different kind of networks? And do you have any experience as well with cross-border mobile connectivity?
Well, maybe I can tell you something. We have quite a lot experience with cross-border and mobile communication connectivity. What we do is we use a SIM on chip, and this is a roaming chip, roaming SIM card. So we have, in our case at this moment, we use Telenor. And Telenor SIMs are then choosing the best available network at the location. So that, well, it chooses from, if there are 5 available providers in Belgium, it chooses the best in the street, and in another street it can be a different provider.
Okay, and how does that work exactly? How do payments work? Or is it a subscription or something? Or
yeah, we have a subscription to a provider where we pay for the data we use. Well, in our case, it can be a little bit different, as we have about 75,000 sensors or devices in the field. But yeah, it works like that. You pay a monthly fee for to Telenor.
And the amount of data you have for that subscription is more than enough?
Yeah, you have different grades for that. For example, our sensors, they're using 100 KB a month. And the access control systems for underground containers, they use about 1 MB per month.
Okay, that's really low.
Yes, and that's important to have your data as low as possible to be also to have the maximum capability of your battery.
Yeah, that's one of the problems we had as well, because we wanted to send data almost continuously. And if you want to do that, then it's generating a lot more data. And that made it difficult for us.
Yes, that's very difficult. And then you should think about LoRa or Sigfox. But then it's the problem is that it's more difficult to reach your sensor and to do updates on your embedded software on a sensor. And we say normally, well, for us, it's not safe enough also, LoRa.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, we want to be able to just to have a secured connection directly, have the handshake of the sensor to our server.
And why do you say that it's not safe enough?
Well, for us, we think in LoRa and Sigfox is just sending some data into the air, which can be picked up by the Sigfox network, but also it's easier to hack.
Okay, Jan, this was your last slide?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm looking at the time. It's 4:05, and we should actually close at around 4, and we all have, well, at least I have another meeting waiting for me. So anyway, we had about 2 hours of exchange on very different topics. It gives you also a taste of what you can expect in the cookbook on the different items we will be working on. This whole session has been recorded, so will become available also for colleagues or others who you would like to take notice of it. So you will be informed about that. Well, I don't know whether we will do another session. We might actually do something which is connected to the cookbook early next year, so that we can take some examples from the cookbook and actually share it with you all. For so far, I would actually like to thank you all for being on board today. And for sharing and taking your time for it, and hopefully I did. We all learned a little bit again from smart cities, mid-sized cities for the future. Thank you very much for your attendance, and stay in touch.